Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to Talk About Real. I'm your host, Bianca, and I'm so glad that you're here today. And guys, I am so excited about today's episode. We have John Cann joining us. John is a professional stunt coordinator, he's a stunt performer, an actor, a stunt instructor, and stunt equipment innovator. John has had a decades long career in the entertainment industry. He's appeared in hundreds of feature films, television, and live shows as a stunt performer and an actor. He's been in Batman Forever, Miss Congeniality, Walker, Texas Ranger, 50 plus episodes of that. And he's also recently produced his own short film, The Deepest Dark. And he's the president of Action PAC Stunts LLC. So we are just so blessed to have him here. Most of all, he loves the Lord. So without further ado, please welcome John.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you? Thank you so much for being here.
Doing great. Glad to be here.
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to know the Lord?
Well, I've been in the film industry for a long time. When I was 19 years old, I went to Los Angeles to pursue my career, and kind of ran screaming from the Methodist Church at that point in my life because had some issues with some leadership there that was just kind of odd. I had a retreat that I tried to invite some friends to. And,
Mhm.
I was probably 17, 18 years old, whatever, and invited my buddies, and we were in a band together and, just kind of doing a lot of things we probably shouldn't be doing. And I invited them to this retreat for the Methodist Youth Fellowship. And they finally agreed to go with me. And one of the pastors like caught them sneaking out to have a cigarette during the retreat and
Mhm.
sent them home.
Oh no. From the
And I
retreat.
was like, wait a minute, it's like I set the hook, I reel them in, and you throw them back. What the
Right.
heck?
Yeah.
And so that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. So I kind of just took off, and that was in Indiana where I grew up, and decided to just take off and go to LA and try my hand at the stunt business, and went to Kahana Stunt School out there in Chatsworth,
Wow.
and learned my craft from started learning from him, and then realized that I was teaching stunts at a stunt school, and had never been in a movie. So I thought it might be time to go out and do the real deal. So um, that being said, I went out and realized that it's a family business, and the only way I know to get into a family business is, you're either born into it, marry into it, or find somebody to adopt you.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I wasn't born into it, and I wasn't ready to get married, so I had to find somebody to adopt me real quick. And ran into a gentleman through some friends of mine named Greg Elam,
Mhm.
and Greg was Richard Pryor's stunt double at the time,
Wow.
so he was big time. He was working in, he was the guy that did the that doubled Richard on Superman in the Superman movie where he fell off the skyscraper with the skis on. Right, that was Greg. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
What?
yeah, he's still around, still doing stuff, but he really kind of took me under his wing and started put my name in the hat and things like that. Meanwhile, I was running wild in Hollywood as a 20-something-year-old kid who really didn't know a whole heck of a lot about how the world worked, and just doing way too much partying and having a good time, and kind of hit rock bottom at one point. Just wasn't doing well. Didn't have a job, didn't have a car. I wrecked my van on the beach, and didn't have a vehicle, and Santa Ana's were kicking up, and I was doing some things I shouldn't have been doing, and basically said, Lord, there's got to be something better than this.
Right.
And he delivered me from my addiction right there on the spot. And
Wow.
yeah, never went back and touched that stuff again. And when I got to Hollywood, cocaine was king, and
Mhm.
if you weren't doing that, you weren't working. At
Mhm.
least that was the lie that I believed.
Mhm.
So then I got invited to a stuntman's Bible study out at Lane Levitt's place, and Lane Levitt used to run Levitation, and that was a big equipment company. He, all the big movies in the 80s and 90s, and beyond. He was doing the rigging and all the air rams and ratchets, and you know custom And I started going to that Bible study, and it was being run by a gentleman named Bob Terhune. And Bob Terhune, he was just this big old cowboy, holy roller. I'd never experienced anything like the Pentecostal movement.
Right.
They were speaking in tongues and using oil and all kinds of stuff. And I was a Methodist. I was like, okay, what's going on here?
Wow.
And just started really getting into the Word and really learning about it. And he looked at me one day and said, "Do you believe that this is the living Word of God?" And I said, "Well, it was written by people. I don't know, how living it is." And he said, let me ask you a question. And at this point, I had read the Bible from cover to cover 3 times,
Wow. Wow. Okay.
just trying to get a handle, just trying to figure things out.
Mhm.
Um, and and that was over. That was before I got saved. You know what I mean? I was trying to read the Bible without the Holy Spirit, so
Right. Yeah.
I wasn't getting it.
Mhm.
And he says, well, before I go back, I'm gonna go back a little bit here. I have to give credit to my grandparents and my parents. They did take me to church. They did show me the right way. I just, had some bad experiences. And if you're not going to church because you don't like hypocrites, get over it. We're all hypocrites. Go to church, okay?
That's true. Yeah.
It's you can't get away from them. They're everywhere, and
Right.
some of us are them. So, um, but anyway, I'm sitting in the Bible study, and he looks at me and says, Bob Terhune looks at me and says, "Do you believe this is the living Word of God?" And I hemmed and hawed, and I'm like, "I don't know, I mean, it's meant to be interpreted and this and that." He said, "Let me ask you a question. How many of each animal did Noah take on the ark?" Two, right? I mean, that, two of every animal, right? He looked at me, he said, "You're wrong. Look it up. Go read it again." And I thought, I'm wrong. I'm not wrong. Yeah, I know he took two of every. I heard this story since I was a kid. It's two of
Right.
every animal. Of course it is. And I went back and I read my Bible, and I'll be darned if somebody hadn't rewritten my Bible, because he took 14 of every clean animal on the ark.
Mhm.
Seven pairs of every clean animal,
Right.
right? And I'm like,
Mhm.
how did I miss that?
Right.
How did I not ever see that ever?
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
and that was when I kind of started realizing that it is the living Word of God, and it is alive and well. And
Right.
if you read it and you pay attention and you pray and you get in touch with God, He'll show up. And that was one of the things that he told me as well. He said, "Look, if you're not sure," I said, "I'm not so, the reason I'm here is because I have my doubts about the reality of God."
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
he said, "Well, there's a simple solution to that." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Ask him.
That's awesome.
Ask him if he's real,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, and ask with a sincere heart, expecting an answer."
Exactly.
And boy, I tell you what, I asked him and he showed up.
Yeah.
I was sitting in church one morning with my now ex-wife, but at the time my wife, and we'd just been married not too long, and I'm sitting in the front row of the church on the way over there in Los Angeles, off of Ventura Boulevard,
Mhm.
and uh, listening to Jack Hayford. And all of a sudden I'm praying with my eyes closed, and all of a sudden I was looking at Jesus like I'm looking at you right now. I
What?
mean, the lights came on inside my head, behind my eyelids, and I was looking at Jesus. And that picture that the little girl painted of Jesus a little while ago?
Mhm.
She said,
Mhm.
yeah, that's exactly what he looked like.
Yeah.
I saw that picture and I'm like, that's him. That's amazing. But
Yeah.
I sat up and my wife looked at me. She's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I think I just saw Jesus." And she's like, "Okay, yeah, whatever." And so
Oh.
went a couple more weeks, and then the guys were talking about being baptized in the Holy Spirit and this and that, and I was like, I'm not so sure about the whole speaking in tongues thing and all that. I'm a Methodist, for crying out loud. We don't do that. And nothing against Methodists, by the way, just so y'all know. But
Right.
I just didn't grow up experiencing anything like that. And they laid hands on me and started praying over me, and I started speaking in tongues, and I hit the floor, and I couldn't get up. And there was 5 or 6 stunt guys with their hands on me praying, and
Wow.
I hit the floor. I felt like I got pushed to the floor,
Right.
and I thought they were holding me down.
Mhm.
And when I opened my eyes and looked around, they were all standing 3 and 4 feet away from me, and I could not get up off the ground.
Wow.
And I just heard God kinda whisper in my ear, "Now do you believe I'm real?" And I
That's
said,
awesome.
"Can I get up now?" Just like the song, and it was like, "Oh my gosh." And and I don't I don't know why he decided to do that with me, because I don't
Mhm.
know a whole lot of other people that they have that kind of experience with God.
Right.
Um, maybe it's just because 'cause I'm hard-headed, I don't know, and he knew that the only way to get me to pay attention was to whack me with a 2 by 4, uh, I don't know, but,
Yeah.
that was pretty much it. Ever since then, I've been, speaking in tongues and praying in tongues, and I have a gift of, prophetic words and, discernment, and, yeah, God's been good, and He's kept me alive for 40 odd years in the stunt business. I've been doing this stuff for over 40 years and, never broken a bone, never been seriously hurt. Nobody's ever died on a set that I've worked on.
That's that's incredible. God is so good, and
He
I
is.
love
He
how,
is.
everyone's relationship with him is personal, and it's like it's personally catered to you, and he knew what he needed to do to get you to believe.
Yeah.
And so thank you for sharing that incredible testimony. That is, I mean, I'm mind blown.
No, it
I was
was
not expecting that. That's awesome.
well, one thing I learned at the Stuntmen's Bible study as well is that there's no atheists in a foxhole. And when you're in the stunt business, it's the closest thing to being in the military that you can get to without actually being in the military, as far as the risk
Right.
and the danger and the injuries that can occur. We get blown up a lot. We get shot. We fall out of helicopters and things. So I mean, it can be very, very, very dangerous, and it can kill you.
Right.
Um, and the burn units in Los Angeles at the Los Angeles County Hospital is fantastic because of the film industry. Because we see combat level injuries on film sets.
Yeah. Getting set on I saw a video or a picture of you being set on fire.
Yeah, I do fire burns. I'm kind of one of the last of a dying breed of stunt performer. I'm what they call an all around exotic stunt performer. I do, multiple discipline gags, like fire gags on out a window while doing a high fall. So you got multiple things that you have to be dealing with all at the same time. And those types of gags where there's a lot of moving parts, and a lot of guys do that, but they might not know how to do the fire part, or they might not know how to do the window crash part, or they might not know how to do the high fall part.
Right.
But I spent 14 years in Los Angeles learning from the best in the world how to do what I do, and it's paid off. It's been Greg really put it in my head, to put it into perspective, that why am I doing this?
Right.
I'm doing it so a bunch of people can sit in a dark room and go, wow, that was cool. Right? I mean, I'm not going to cure cancer or save the world or anything like that. It's entertainment, you know.
Well,
And
yeah.
you got to put it into that perspective. I lost a couple of friends to this business, and it was tragic, because it's just like, why?
Yes.
Why? It's like some goofy TV show, and now my best friend's not here anymore, you know.
Oh.
And it can be a brutal, brutal business in that regard. But when you put it into perspective, it makes it a lot easier to say no.
Mhm.
When somebody asks you to do something and you look at it and it's like, first of all, you got the Holy Spirit going, don't do it, don't do it, don't do
Yeah.
it. And if you ignore that, then, you got to look at it like, why am I doing this? You know,
Right.
is it really telling the story? Is it important to the script? Why am I doing this?
Well, you guys are the real, like, stars of the you guys are the ones that are doing the actual stunts, so those action scenes that everyone's just amazed by, it's actually you doing it. It's not the actors, the
Right.
celebrities that, get the
A lot
credit
of
for it.
a
It's
lot of
actually
time
you.
a lot of times, there's some guys out there that do their own stuff. I mean, working on Walker, Texas Ranger, there
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
there wasn't anybody on the set who could do a fight scene better than Chuck. You know, um, the he had doubles. I mean, there's a picture of me over there with Chuck when I doubled him for a high fall. But that was one of those unique situations where his regular stunt double Kenny Gibson didn't want to mess with the high fall, and high falls are what I do. That's one of my specialties. And so, I got a I got a weird phone call from Chuck's son Eric. Eric Norris was the stunt coordinator on Walker,
Okay.
and Eric calls me up. He says, "Yeah, Dad requested you for this gag. He wants you to double him." I said, "Well, I think you got the wrong number. You need to call Kenny, right?" Because Kenny looks exactly like, I mean, he looked exactly like Chuck Norris. I mean,
Right.
Chuck and Kenny would walk into a restaurant or something, and people were like, "Who do I ask for the autograph?" They looked identical. And he was an incredible stunt guy. He was the original Rocket Man. That's how I got tied into flying the rocket belt. But that's another story. So anyway, Eric calls me up and says, "Yeah, I want you. Dad requested you to do this gag." And I said, "Well, what is it?" He says, "It's a high fall." I said, "Oh, okay." And he said, "Well, you know what I look like, right?" And he said, "No problem. We're going to put a beard and a wig on you and throw you off a building. No one will ever notice." And I thought, okay, that works. I could do that. And then I'm thinking about it a minute longer, and I thought, wait a second, Chuck falls off a building? Is the show over? Are we canceled? What's going on? Right? I'm like, well, how's the hero fall off a building? I mean, that's ridiculous. You know. And he says, no, 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 don't worry about it. It's a dream sequence. I said, oh, okay. And
Wow.
and then I'm like, wait a minute. Why doesn't Kenny want to do this high fall? How high is this high fall? Are you guys just putting me in a spot because I'm expendable and you got to have Kenny around? Like, oh my gosh. So he's like, no, no, no. Dad he saw you do a bunch of high falls on the show, and he's never seen you do the same high fall twice. And he knows this is a complicated scenario, and he wants to have a lot of action in the fall, but he's supposed to be dead. So how does a dead body have a lot of action in a fall? You know what I mean? So he's like,
Right.
I need you to figure that out." So I'm like, "Oh, great, okay." And had Kenny get up on the top of the building and tied him off with a harness so he could kind of lean out a little bit while he was on top of the building, and he's supposed to be getting shot. And so I said, "Wave your arms over your head and act like like you're getting shot from behind."
Mhm,
And
mhm.
and I had him waving his arms, doing all the squibs. And then when it came time to do the high fall, I waved my arms, and when I went off the building, my arms were already moving, so it created the action to do. I did a 1.5 with a half twist into the bag, and Chuck loved it, so it was great. But that was the only time I ever got to double Chuck, which was, an honor in my opinion. It was a high point in my career.
That's fantastic. I
Yeah.
mean, that is awesome. Who can actually say that that is their life? Like, not many people can say that they've
My children got
accomplished
accused of lying a lot. People would say how tough Chuck Norris was, and they say, "Yeah, well, my dad's tougher." And it's like,
That's awesome. That's so awesome. So how has like God been with you throughout your career since you've, given
I
your life back to him and all
when I
that?
before I got saved, actually, I was doing a job on a movie called Alley Cat. And it was a horrible movie. Don't go see it. You'll want the 2 hours of your life back. It's a terrible movie. It was one of the first films I ever did, and I just took the job because I wanted to do something.
Mhm,
And I ended up doubling one of the actors in the show. And there was a fight scene on the roof of the Hollywood Towers Hotel that
mhm,
culminated in him being thrown over the side and doing a high fall.
mhm,
Well, I was out there all day. It was a beautiful day, perfect day for a high fall, no wind, it was sunny, really, perfect. And I always assess my risk factors whenever I'm
mhm,
doing a stunt to figure out what can go wrong. And then I
mhm.
try to eliminate those things, right?
Right.
Well, when we got there, everything was perfect. I had a couple of issues. I had one guy on the airbag that I didn't know,
Mhm,
which is a concern, because if they've never seen you do a fall, then they don't know what to look for. And the only place a high fall screws up is at the top. As
mhm.
far as that's where the problems are. So if something happens, you can see it right away, and
Right.
you can move the bag or catch the fall, do whatever you have to do to get between the faller and the ground.
Right.
As a spotter. So I had one guy that I was a little didn't know much about, but the other three guys, they were solid.
Hmm.
The airbag was sitting on the curb, on the sidewalk and the street. So in order to keep it level, we put some plywood underneath it to level it out so that the
Hmm.
bag would be level.
Hmm.
Well, I was a little concerned about that because if they tried to pull the bag and it got hung up on the plywood, they wouldn't be able to pull the bag.
Right.
Right. So I had that. And then, the airbag was a little small for as high as I was going.
Right.
But I'd hit it from 35 feet and it was fine. I was going about 65 feet. And it was like, I know this is going to catch me, but it's probably going to hit like a rock.
Hmm.
And so I was, I had those little things in my head, but I was okay with it. So then they sat around all day shooting and we didn't get around to doing the high fall till after the sun went down.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had started out with 3 risk factors, right?
Hmm.
Then the sun went down. That's 4,
Right.
right? Then it started to rain, 5.
Oof.
Okay, and then the ledge I was going off had some moss on it. When it got wet, it got slippery. That's 6.
Oh.
Then
Oh
all of a
boy.
sudden there was some lightning. That's 7. The wind started to pick up, 8, right? And then
Yeah.
there was a street light came on between me and the airbag, and it reflected off the rain that was coming down, so I couldn't see the airbag. There's 9. Right? So my risk factors went from 3 to 9 like that,
Mm.
right? And I looked at I was in my trailer and I was praying. I'm like, Lord, this just isn't this isn't sitting right. What should I do? And I heard an audible voice say, "Don't do it."
Wow.
And I looked around because I thought somebody was messing with me in the honey
Hmm.
wagon. And I opened the door and looked outside. There was nobody outside. There was nobody in either room next to me. And I just like, well, okay. And so I went to the coordinator, who was Kim Kahana. I said, Kim, I can't do it. He said, why not? I said, because God just told me not to. And he said, what? Oh, you're just a chicken. I said, yeah. And tomorrow I'll be a live chicken.
Right.
So use a dummy, throw a dummy off the building. I'm not going to die for this film.
Right. Good for you.
And it was my first big opportunity to do a big high fall on a movie. And I said no. and
Mm.
and it took me a while to get over that.
Yeah.
The I felt like I chickened out, but I really
Mm.
it just wasn't. It wasn't right. Something just was. It just was. If I'd have done it, I'd have died. I know.
Right.
If I'd have done it, I'd have died.
Oh my
you
goodness.
And so they used the dummy. Everything was great. They didn't need me to do the fall anyway. I did the fight scene. I did all that kind of stuff. Did all the other doubling, and it was great. But you know, I had a vision several years ago where I was packing up my stunt bag in the vision, and there were 4 huge angels standing behind me. And one of them was like soaking wet, like he'd been swimming in a pool. His wings were all dripping water. He was just soaking wet. The second one was all beat up, like he'd been in a prize fight, had a fat lip and a black eye, and looked like Rocky.
Oh.
And the third one was just exhausted. He was all out of breath, just breathing heavy. And the fourth one had like smoke coming off of him, like he'd been in a house fire. Right,
Mhm.
his wings were singed. He was, had black smudges all over him. He'd been in a fire. And the one that was all beat up looked at me and said, "Are you done yet?" And I looked at him and said, "No." And he said, "All right." And then I woke up.
Oh my.
So I know I have at least 4 angels that watch over me all the time, and they're very busy and they're very tired and they want me to stop. But as long as I got them around, I can keep going, and I intend to until they tell me to stop. So it's
Wow.
been good. I was doing Action Fest up in North Carolina in Asheville, and it was a film festival that was honoring second unit directors and stunt coordinators and stunt performers. That's what the
Mhm.
whole thing was about.
Right.
And I was doing the live stunt show uh, out in the parking lot at the theater where we were holding holding the event, and had all kinds of people, motorcycles and martial artists and gunfighters, and we had a crane for high falls, and we did ratchets and air rams and all kinds of stuff out in the parking lot. Did a full burn fire gag. I got lit on fire by Gina Carano at one point, so that was fun.
I think that's a picture I saw.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah, exactly. It's on my website. Yeah, I was sitting at dinner with her and Chuck Norris and Kung Lee and a bunch of people, and we were talking about the show the next day. And I looked over at her and said, "Would you like to light me on fire tomorrow?"
Oh,
she said, "What?" I said, "I got to do a Firebird. You want to light me?" She said, "Are you hitting on me?" I said, "No, I'm really going to be lit on fire. I need you to light me." And she said, "Sure, I'd love to do that." So she lit me on fire the next day. But there was a woman there at the film festival who was, she had discernment, like real heavy duty discernment with like
wow.
angels and stuff.
Wow.
And I walked into the VIP room, and she was standing with her back to me, looking over the railing into the foyer of the theater. And
Mhm.
I came into the VIP room behind her, and all of a sudden she just turned around and looked at me, and I was like, "Is there a problem?" And she said, "No, no problem. Do you have any idea how many angels just came in the room with you?"
Oh my goodness.
And I said, "Well, I know at least four." And she said, "Try 40." She said, "You got more angels surrounding you than I've ever seen anybody in my life." She's like, "I don't know, what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I'm doing the stunt show out in the parking lot." She says, "Oh, well, that explains." And nobody got hurt. The show went off without a hitch. It was beautiful. Did it 3 years in a row, and it's just, it is when you know that God's got you. Then people say, "Oh, that takes a lot of courage." It doesn't take a lot of courage. I know God's got me. And I know he'll stop me if I'm going to do something that's not going to work.
Wow.
And you got to trust that. I tell, when I'm training these people, I tell them all the time, don't do this if you're not dialed into your creator.
Wow.
Don't do this work unless you're prayed up, unless everybody around you is prayed up. If you got somebody on your safety team who won't pray with you, get rid of them. Get them off your safety team,
That's
because they're not
amazing.
because they're not covered.
Right.
you know and it's not a you know a nasty thing. It's just a fact. if you
It
want to if you
is.
want to do this work and not die doing it, make sure you're prayed up and you're hearing the Holy Spirit and you're paying attention. you know I did a high fall one time on a movie called The Beacon, Haunting at the Beacon. And I was going backwards out of a fifth-story window at the Rogers Hotel in Waxahachie, Texas. And the hotel, it was a ghost story that we were shooting. And the crew, everybody was staying in the hotel where we were shooting the movie.
Mhm.
Okay. The hotel was notoriously haunted.
Ooh.
Okay, which I know from a Christian standpoint, that's kind of whatever, but I can't explain the stuff that was going on there.
Right.
One of the grips, when he checked into the hotel, went into his room, to the went into the bathroom, and the toilet paper roll was in the middle of the floor in the bathroom.
Hmm.
So he picked it up and put it on the roller and went back to work. Right, went to work for 8 hours. Came back into his room, and the toilet paper roll was in the same spot in the middle of the floor. So he picked it up, put it back on the roller, turned around, got his DOP kit, turned back around. It was in the middle of the floor again.
Not
He
saying
left. He
that.
left and
No,
never
thank you.
came back. He quit. He was like, "I'm out. You find another grip. I'm not coming back. I'm done." And he left.
Oh,
And
good.
then my son came to set to visit, my oldest, and there was a public bathroom on the second floor, and we were at lunch, and he needed to go to the bathroom. So I told him where it was, and he went down the hall. A couple minutes later, he comes back, and he's white as a sheet. And I said, "Is there a problem, Dakota? Are you okay?" He says, "I don't know what just happened in that bathroom, but I'm not going back in there ever again." And I
Oof.
said, what happened? He said, well, I was standing at the sink washing my hands, and the towel dispenser at the other end of the bathroom dispensed a towel. And
Mm.
I said, well, it's a motion sensor. It was probably just a shadow. He said, oh no, that wasn't all that happened. I said, what happened? He said, well, it dispensed the towel, and then I turned the water off, and I dried my hands, and then I walked past the sink, and it came on again.
Oof.
And I had to turn the knob 3 times to turn it off.
Just burn down the whole building.
He was like, I am not going back in there again.
Oh my
The hair was
goodness.
on the back of his neck, was raised up. He was freaked out. So anyway, we were doing this high fall, and I had to go backwards out the window. And when you do a high fall with glass, you use tempered glass, because if you use candy glass or spun sugar, it'll break in big shards just like regular plate glass, right?
Mhm.
And it's impossible to get to the airbag before the glass does when you go out a window,
Right.
right? So you don't want big shards of anything sharp landing in your airbag prior to you getting there, because the
Exactly.
airbag might not be there when you get there.
Right.
So you use the tempered glass, which breaks in little tiny chunks, like your windshield on your car, right? It breaks in
Mhm.
your windows on your car that break in little tiny pieces if somebody breaks them. Well, in order for that to happen, you have to have explosive charges or a breaker on the glass to break the glass before you get to it.
Mhm.
Okay. So that A, you don't have any resistance, and B, you go through the window. Okay.
Right.
Now, despite what people might think, you're not going through tempered glass without the breakers.
Right.
It's not going to break. Okay.
Mhm.
So everything was ready to go. We're up in the room. I got my ramp built. I'm ready to go out the window. Roll cameras, action. I throw myself against the window and bounce off. And I'm like, dude, I mean, I threw myself hard against that window. It hurt. I was like, oh, okay,
Right.
wait a minute. What just happened? I looked at the effects guy, Frank. I said, Frank, what happened? He said, I don't know. So we'll figure it out, man. I'm going to go out in the hallway and get my heart rate back to where it needs to go. And we'll try this again. Right. So I'm sitting out in the hallway praying, and something just wasn't sitting right. So I
Mhm.
got on my radio. I said, hey, there's a bunch of guys standing around my airbag doing safety work, right? And the whole town of Waxahachie is out watching this high fall, this stunt.
Right.
And they see the window go whoop, whoop, and everybody starts screaming, abort, abort, abort. Nobody came out the window. So everybody in the streets go, what just happened? Whatever. And so we go to do it again, and I'm on the radio, and I said, hey, I need everybody down there to stop what you're doing and go over and just lay hands on the building and pray.
Wow.
So all my guys stopped what they were doing, walked over, put their hand on the building and bowed their head, and then went back to work. And everybody on the streets going, what was that all about? And
Oh.
so I'm sitting out there in the hallway. I finally got where I felt good. So I went back in, and I looked up, and the blinds there were blinds hanging in front of the window, and when I hit the blinds, they were supposed to go out the window with me, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I said, "Who rehung the blinds? I got to make sure those are up there right." And he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Didn't those fall down when I threw myself against them?" He said, "No, they didn't go anywhere. Nobody's reset anything." I said, okay, wait a minute. So I go up, I look, and they're just hanging there like they're supposed to be hanging there with all the string, everything intact. I'm like, no, 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 no. You guys those things need to fall down when I breathe on them. And I said, get set dressing up here. We need to cut those strings and just tape them up there so that they'll come out with me. And they're like, okay. So they fixed that. And had had I gone out the window on the first take, those blinds would have hung me up and dropped me straight down the side of the building, and I would have died because there was a metal awning that I had to clear to get to the airbag. And if I hadn't if I'd have gotten hung up by anything, if anything would have slowed my momentum down, I would not have hit the airbag. I would have been in the wrong place. And so that was a miracle right there, right?
Yeah.
And I look over at Frank. I said, "Did you figure it out?" And he says, "Yeah." I said, "What was wrong?" He says, "I don't know." I thought you said you figured it out. He says, I did. I checked everything. The explosives were good. The charge is good. The battery's good. The switch is good. Everything's good. It should have blown. I don't know why it didn't go.
Right.
I'm like, all right, man, I'm doing this again. But if I bounce off this window, I'm going to kick your, you know, it's not going to make me happy. So second time, bing, bang, out the window. Beautiful high fall. Hit my mark. Dead on the money. Got a little scratch on my nose from some glass, but that was about it. And, everything went really well. And I'm driving home, and my friend Mark D'Alessandro calls me up, and he says, "Hey, I don't think there was anything, evil or demonic going on up there." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, as it happened, everything worked perfectly.
Mhm.
You're fine, right?" I said,
Mhm.
"Yeah." He said, "I think your angels were working overtime, man."
Mm,
So what do you mean? He said, "Well,"
absolutely.
he said one of them was holding the window in, because the window was only held in by little pieces of wood like this. It should have popped out of the frame when I hit it the first time, and
Wow.
it didn't move, right? He said the first
Yeah.
one was holding the window in, the second one was disconnecting the special effects, and the third one was whispering in your ear, "Look at the blinds, man. Look at the blinds."
Right. I believe it. I
I'm like,
really
yeah, okay, that's tracks. That tracks. That sounds about right. And then a couple days later, I get a call from a friend of mine, and he says, "Man, I got a picture of you coming out that window from the street. It looked great. Hey, you want a copy of it?" I said, "Oh, absolutely." He said, "Who was the guy in the cowboy hat leaning out the window after you went out the window? Didn't he blow the shot?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "There's a guy with dark glasses and a cowboy hat leaning out the window, looking at you as you went out the window." I said, "Man, there wasn't anybody anywhere near me when I went out that window. The closest person was 20 feet away on the other side of the room."
Mhm.
Right. There's no way that anybody blew the shot. He's like, "Well, I got a picture." And he sent it to me. And sure enough, there's a cowboy looking out the window watching me that wasn't there. And
Oh,
it's like, I mean, I was like, okay, that's crazy. And then I found out that that room was the most paranormally active room in the hotel. And a cowboy shot himself in that room back in the 1800s.
oh my goodness.
Yeah. And it was like, and I'd love to be able to show you the picture, but the computer I had it on crashed and I lost it, so I don't have the picture. But it was freaky. And
That
if you look at the film footage in the movie, you can see a mist in the window that shouldn't be there because we were using smokeless, odorless gunpowder.
that is just, I mean,
Yeah,
so are you
yeah.
thinking that the cowboy was maybe like a
And the cowboy was like, "This guy's trying to kill himself. I better disconnect things. I can't let this happen again." I don't know. All I know is that if I'd have gone out the window on the first take, I'd have died.
Yeah.
You know
Wow.
what I mean? And God has been, He does stuff like that with me all the time, where something will happen, and I'll hesitate for a second, and if I hadn't hesitated, then it would have been different. You know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm really blown away by everything that you're saying. Have you slowed down at all? I mean, I know that you're still, I mean, are you still doing those same stunts and all that
I
or
I'm still working. I've slowed down a little bit just because of with the COVID situation,
yeah.
everything shut down, and I my God's bigger than any virus, so I refuse to get vaccinated. I won't. I wasn't playing that game. I got nothing against anybody else who wants to do that kind of thing, but I'm an athlete. I can't put unknown substances into my body, and that just wasn't sitting right. And
Right.
they also used aborted fetal tissue to develop the vaccines, and that violates my religious beliefs. So I was like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
And
good for you.
so I pretty much had to take on other jobs and things. I got a license selling health insurance there for a little while. Still have the license, so if anybody out there needs really good health insurance, give me a call. Um, but I mean, you have to have multiple streams of income in this business, especially if you're not in a major production hub. Dallas is not a major production hub.
Yeah.
And I've been doing a lot of teaching, a lot of stunt instruction with people that want to break into the business. And you know, I still do the work. I've been getting on the other side of the camera a little bit more, doing more producing and directing and more writing and that type of thing. I just submitted some screenplays to the guys at Believe Entertainment, so I'm hoping we can get something going there with uh, Chuck Konzelman and Carrie Solomon. They're the ones that did Nefarious.
Yeah, I mean, you say you slow down, but you're still doing so much. And we actually have a clip here of the rocket belt. So I'm going to
Yeah.
go ahead and roll this clip really quick, and
Okay.
then we'll talk a little bit about it.
Cool.
That was awesome.
It was an experience, most definitely. I was you notice the rig on the top of that was a spotting rig. That was my one and only flight with the rocket belt. Um, I, I was in line to train to be the next pilot, and Kenny Gibson, the owner, who was also Chuck Norris's stunt double. Um, he and I, we'd known each other since Hollywood. I'd done, a bunch of ground crew work with the Rocket Belt, traveled all over the world, went to Santiago, Chile, and Turkmenistan, and all kinds of places with the Rocket Man, and we flew all over the world. But I did, I was the guy that was fueling it up and making sure it was going to work.
Right.
So I am literally a rocket scientist. Go figure. Um, but it's kind of a funny story. The first time I dealt with Kenny was in Los Angeles, and he had bought some equipment from me because he was flying the belt and he needed some protective equipment. So I ordered some body armor for him. My company Action Pack was formed in order to publish 3 books that I wrote called the Stunt Guide, and then I got into selling equipment and building equipment and doing it just grew from there. But that was one of the ways that I would hustle in Los Angeles was I'd drive around with a bunch of stunt pads in the back of my truck, and guys would need a spine pad or something, and I'd have it there, and they loved me. So it was a great way to get in the door and get my foot in the door and get to know the guys and that kind of thing. So it worked out pretty well. But he had bought this body armor from me, and it had arrived. I had it in the back of my van, my minivan, and I was driving on Ventura Boulevard, and I see Kenny get out of this car and walk across the street and push the button on the thing to make the light change, right? And I'm
Mhm.
like screaming at him. I got my window down. I'm like, Kenny, I've got your stuff, man. I've got your pad. Do you want it? And he looks at me and he keeps walking. I'm like, Kenny, it's John. I got your stuff. And he's like, what? And he comes walking over to me, and as he walks up, he goes, "Can I help you?" I said, "Oh my God, you're Chuck Norris. I'm sorry, I thought you were Kenny Gibson." and, and 5 years later, I'm sitting in the makeup trailer on Walker Texas Ranger, and Chuck's sitting next to me, and he says, "Hey, what are you doing here?" I said, "Oh, you're gonna beat me up later on today." He said, "Oh, that's great." I said, "So you remember me?" He said, "Oh yeah, you're the only person that's ever mistaken me for my stunt double in public."
Oh my goodness.
So
Oh
anyway, when I got here, I was working on Walker. I was hanging out with Kenny, and my mentor Greg Elam was doubling for Clarence Gilliard, and so that's how I kind of got tied into the show because they needed stunt equipment and things, and I was building air rams and ratchets and airbags and all kinds of equipment, and they needed it here, and nobody here had any really decent high tech stuff, so I moved here and started working on that show, but. Kenny asked me if I wanted to fly the belt. And I'm like, "Well, yeah, of course I want to fly the rocket belt." He said, "Well, let's give it a shot, see how you do." And the hardest part about flying the rocket belt, okay, you got to understand that flying the rocket belt is kind of like learning how to ride a motorcycle, okay? And
Mm-hmm.
the motorcycle is a Harley 1200cc big bike, right? It's up on a stand with the back tire off the ground. It's wide open in fourth gear. They kick the stand out, and you got 30 seconds to figure out how to ride it. Okay, that's what flying a rocket belt is like. And the hardest part is getting the stupid Roadrunner music to stop playing in your head before you roll to the throttle. Because anytime you've ever seen anybody strap a rocket to their back, it didn't end well in the
Right.
cartoons. You know what I'm saying? So I put it on for that first flight. I flew 2 tanks of fuel and did pretty good. I lost control at one point, and that's where you see the edits on the video. Uh, kind of cut that part out. That was embarrassing, but I lost control, and then I regained control and landed it. And
Wow.
Kenny said he'd never seen anybody do that that was that was flying it for the first time. And I said, "First time? What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, this is the first time you've ever flown it." I said, "No, it's not." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I fly this thing every night when I go to bed.
Oh, that's
I've
awesome.
flown this thing a million times in my dreams. Are you kidding me?"
Oh,
After you watch him take off and fly around, it's like I want to do that. One of the reasons I do high falls is because I was had one of those flying dreams when I was a kid, right? And you push off the wall and you fly around and stuff, and then all of a sudden you can't fly and you start to fall and you wake up.
yeah.
And I had one of those dreams, and my mom caught me jumping off the couch down in the living room trying to fly because I knew
Oh,
it was possible. And so I've been climbing higher and higher and jumping off higher and higher things to figure it out. One of these days I'm going to figure it out, but it just hasn't happened yet. I always tell the cameraman, don't anticipate my high fall. Okay. Don't like start moving the camera down when I jump because I might not come down. you're,
one of
you're not
these days.
you're not gonna want to miss it, okay? Because I'm gonna figure it out. All right. I figure the higher you
Oh,
get, the more time I have to figure it out.
that's awesome. That's incredible. You've lived
But
such an
but
amazing
let,
life.
let me
Yeah.
let me just finish the rocket belt story though.
Oh yeah.
The reason that he said I did a great job. I said, well, when do we start training? He said, you're not. I said, why not? He said, well, because nobody's ever flown the rocket belt without crashing it. And you have a wife and 3 kids, and I'm not going to have that on my conscience if something happens to you. And I started begging and pleading with him, come on, man, let me do it. I know I can do it without crashing. He said, nobody's ever done it without crashing, John. I said, oh, come on. I said, look, if I can take off, pirouette, fly to the end of the tether, pirouette again, fly back and land it 10 times in a row without screwing it up, will you let me fly it? He said, absolutely. I said, all right, cool. He said, you pay for the fuel. At $1,200 a gallon and it burns 5 gallons in 30 seconds, that's a pretty pricey proposition, right? So I was
Right.
like, oh man, come on. And then, like 3 days later, Dan Schlund, who is the current pilot and owner, and actually I'm in his hangar right now,
Uh-huh.
um, he crashed it like 3 days later.
Oh,
And like went in the hospital with major burns, and he got hurt pretty bad. So
oh,
that kind of solidified it for me. I was like, okay, all right, I get it. But I mean, I'm pretty sure I could have done it without crashing, but you just never know,
right.
you know. And Kenny didn't want to have that on his conscience. He didn't want to have to tell my kids that he was responsible for me eating it. But we just finished a documentary about the Rocket Man,
Hmm.
and Dan Schlund, who is the current owner of the belt, he bought everything after Kenny passed away a couple years ago. He bought the belts and the hanger and everything, and he went to do a world record about 10 years ago and crashed it and broke his neck. And he's okay, but he has some pretty serious post traumatic stress from crashing it, and he decided that he wanted to do this documentary, and the central theme of the documentary is him getting back on the horse. So he got back in the belt and started training again on the tether and did a free flight to like finish out the film.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah, it's a very cool film, and it goes through all the history of the rocket belt and where it came from, and how many guys have flown it. And that was one of the things Kenny said to me. He said, "John, you're in rarefied air right now." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "More people have walked on the moon than have flown a rocket belt." I said, "Okay, I'll take that. That
Right?
works. There's not too many people can say they've done what I've done, so
No,
you know,
no one.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So
That's yeah,
it's been an interesting trip.
to say the least. I
Yeah,
mean, oh my goodness.
yeah.
Wow. You've been very blessed. I mean, I
Absolutely,
definitely, yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Both
God has been
spiritually and in your career and, in so many different ways. Family, it seems like you've had it all.
yeah,
So
I got 3 great kids, so, that's good. The marriage thing didn't work out so good, but I'm just a classic cliche old stunt guy, lives in a hangar, who's divorced.
well, can you tell us how we can reach you, how we can like find your work, any projects that you're currently working on?
Absolutely, yeah, you can go to actionpack.com, the web address is right there under my name. That's Action PAC, no K. If you go to Action PACK, you'll be going to a box factory, that won't help you. Um But you can go to Action Pack. I've got all my stuff there. You can check out what films I've worked on. You can check out my videos, my demo reels. You can see what kind of equipment I have. I build and design equipment. I've got air rams, which are somewhat obsolete. People don't like to use them, but my air rams people like to use because they don't hurt you. Um, I've developed ratchets and airbags and pipe ramps and all kinds of equipment that I sell to or rent out to productions. If anybody out there needs a stunt coordinator, by all means give me a call. Love to talk to you about your movie. I can make anything happen. Don't give up on your film dreams because you think something's impossible. Okay, I do impossible stuff for a living, so just let me know, and if it can't be done, you know well, there's nothing that can't be done on film. So it's just a question of taking the time and figuring it out. But you can reach me there. I also do a lot of training. So if anybody thinks they want to do stunt work for a living, by all means, check it out. I do all kinds of classes and things. I do 2 and 3 day intensives, and we cover all the basics. There's 3 things that stunt performers do: they fly through the air, they hit the ground, and they do fight scenes. So if you can do those 3 things well, you'll probably live. Probably.
Wow.
So, that's pretty much it. And if anybody wants a public speaker, I do that as well. I'm a motivational speaker. So, Nefarious.
Absolutely. We have a
'Cause
clip.
I have to say, Nefarious isn't a big action film, but it's one of the projects that I'm most proud of because the performances in it are over the top Academy Award winning performances. But unfortunately, nobody got nominated because it's a Christian film.
Oh,
It's a Christian horror film done by Believe Entertainment. Carrie Solomon and Chuck Konzelman wrote and directed the film, and they're geniuses. These guys, they did God's Not Dead and Unplanned, and decided that it's kind of silly to make Christian movies for Christians. So they decided to make a Christian horror film for non-Christians, and they came up with Nefarious. And for those of you who are believers out there, just understand that it's only scary if you're a non-believer.
that's true. Okay, so let's go ahead and roll that clip. Here we go.
Oh? You should have accepted my offer, James.
Execution scheduled for 11 p.m. But he's trying to convince us he's gone insane.
And therefore incapable of being executed.
I need you to prove he's faking it.
Edward? I'm gonna ask you some questions.
I'm not Edward. I'm a demon.
Demons aren't really a thing. What happened to Edward?
We own him.
We?
He's a master manipulator. You have your head so twisted around you think you're the killer, not him.
Now give me something to make me believe you. Prove to me you're a demon.
It's probably just a coincidence.
I want to talk to
The real Edward
Makes me do bad.
I can't stop him.
I need you to see something. You got a fan. Did the same thing with all his victims.
Help me!
I'm trying to, Edward, but you have to answer my questions. You have to tell me the truth.
It won't let me!
It can go away. It can go away. Yes?
No. It's starting to happen. Can you feel it, James? Can you feel it? I think it's time we tell you exactly what it is that we'd like you to do.
It's an amazing movie. I'm telling you, it's the Sean Patrick Flannery's performance is, as far as I'm concerned, right up there with Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs. He's brilliant, just brilliant. And I mean, it's just two guys sitting at a table talking. One
The
of them,
whole
one of them's a demon. The other one's an atheist.
we won't even spoil the end of the movie. I was just going to ask you what happens at the end, but I won't spoil
Yeah,
it.
I can't tell you that, but I played one of the prison guards in there. They needed to have two stunt guys as the prison guards because we had to tackle Sean Patrick Flannery and not hurt him. So we were, they cast us and put us in the film. And when I read the script, I told Carrie, I have to do this movie. You have to let me do something. I'll sweep floors. I don't care. We had an exorcist on set every day we were shooting. There were 14 car accidents in a 3-week shoot amongst the crew. Nobody got hurt, but Satan did not want us making this movie. There were just, the batteries kept draining on the cameras. We had a high fall schedule that we were going to do that we couldn't do because the batteries on the drone we were going to use died. And it was nuts. We, just one thing after another. There was a priest in the cast who was also a trained exorcist, and so he was there every day. And then we had a non-denominational prayer support team that was there as well for anybody that needed to just, if anybody was feeling weird. We had IATSE try to shut us down. Just really evil stuff going on. It was nuts. It was nuts. We were trying to shoot a scene where Sean was talking about Satan, and every time they would say roll cameras, the building would start to moan and groan. It sounded like we were in hell because we were in Oklahoma. And that week that we were shooting in Oklahoma, they had the highest sustained winds in Oklahoma history. And we were in a big stadium, and it would go, and then he'd say cut, and it would stop. And he'd say action, and he'd say cut, and it would stop. It was crazy.
See, people don't believe this stuff, but it's so real, and it's
oh yeah, Satan's real.
Yeah,
but God's realer.
Yeah, he was way more powerful, and it's good that they're shedding light on this, on the darkness, and exposing it. And yeah, the enemy definitely doesn't want that, but it doesn't matter because it was different.
And I mean, a lot of people saw this movie when it came out.
Mhm.
A lot of people. I mean, this thing was one of the biggest kingdom tools to come along in a long time.
Right.
It's the only Christian film I've ever seen where they don't mention the name of Jesus.
Mhm.
Because the demon is doing all the talking, and he calls him the carpenter and the enemy, but he never calls him Jesus, never calls him by his name because the demon can't do that.
Mm.
Which is how you test the spirits, by the way, out there, guys.
Right. Ask if Jesus Christ is Lord.
If you hear a voice telling you to do something, ask it if Jesus Christ is Lord. And there's one thing I did learn a long time ago: God doesn't sound anything like me. If I hear a voice and it sounds like me, it's either me or Satan trying to be me.
Oh my goodness, yes. He will
Yeah,
disguise himself as an angel
yeah.
of,
He's an
of light.
impersonator. He's an impersonator. Yeah.
Yeah. So where can we find that movie? Is it available on?
It's available on YouTube, I know, and probably I think Hulu and a couple other streaming services. If you Google it, you'll be able to find it. It's pretty available. But if you haven't seen it yet, see it. It's amazing. It's amazing. If you got unbeliever friends out there, just tell them that you want to see this great horror movie, and they'll come watch it, and all of a sudden they'll realize, hey, wait a minute.
Right.
So I just think it's brilliant. The concept is amazing, and just the performances are just right spot on, and the biblical information that comes through the film is you can't argue with it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it's basically, there's a book called A Nefarious Plan by Stephen Dace, and that's
Mhm.
that's what the movie is based on. It's a prequel. The movie is the prequel to the book.
Okay.
Okay, and the book is brilliant. It lays out all of Satan's plans for humanity,
Mm.
and he wrote it like 10 years ago. And if you read it, it's like, okay, this just happened yesterday. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like, oh my gosh. And it's very similar to the Screw Tape Letters
Mm.
by C.S. Lewis. I don't know if
Okay.
anybody out there is familiar with that. It's kind of an adult version of the Screw Tape Letters. So anyway, that movie, I think it's really great. I think if you haven't seen it, you need to see it. It's just I just can't say enough about it. One of my proudest projects, and I hardly did anything on it, but you know.
No, that's awesome. I can tell by the clip that it's just seems like it's going to be one of those thrillers going to keep you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And if the message behind it is promoting, the Lord, that's, why not? So that's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that with
Thank you.
us and telling us all about. Thank you for everything. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing all that you've shared. You've inspired me so much. Just hearing your stories, and you can tell that the Lord is with you, and He's just, it's
Yeah,
awesome.
well, I'm gonna leave you with this final bit of inspiration.
Yes.
Never give up on your dreams, ever, ever. If somebody tells you that you need to give up on your dreams in order to make somebody else happy, let that person out of your life. You don't need them there,
Right.
because it's their job to be happy, not yours.
Right.
Okay? Don't let anybody talk you out of doing what God's put on your heart to do. If God put it on your heart to do it, you'll do it.
Right.
Ain't nothing gonna stop you.
That's so true. Nothing can stop you. Yeah. Yeah.
When I went to my guidance counselor in high school, he said, "What do you want to do for a living?" I said, "I want to be a stuntman." He said, "No, really, what do you want to do?" And here I am. So it's all
Yeah.
good.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you again so much for that piece of information, that inspiration there. And thank you again so much for being here, John. It's been such a pleasure and an honor
Well, it's
to
been
have
fun.
you. All
Love to
right.
do it again sometime. God bless you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for listening, and God bless you all, and have a wonderful day.